Rain pounded hard against the windshield, making it nearly impossible to see the winding road ahead. Inside a black luxury SUV, Dorian Belmont, one of the most influential men in Silicon Valley, gripped the steering wheel tightly, even as thick droplets slid down his forehead, blurring his vision. That day, Dorian wasn't with his driver. He had dismissed everyone to be alone. He needed to think. The silence inside the car clashed with the storm outside, and with the one raging inside him. The news he'd received that afternoon still echoed in his mind. His business partner and childhood friend had betrayed him, embezzling millions of dollars from the company they had built together. Dorian, who had always believed loyalty was everything, now drove that rural road as if fleeing not just an imminent scandal, but a disappointment that tore him apart. His phone buzzed on the console. He glanced away for just 1 second. Only one. And it was enough. The sharp curve appeared like a trap. The wheels skidded on the drenched asphalt, and the car lost control completely. In a matter of seconds, the SUV veered off the shoulder and slid down a small embankment, flipping twice before landing on its side, headlights still on, the engine coughing out its last breath. Inside the vehicle, Dorian's world became noise. Shattered glass cut his temple. Blood trickled down his face. A piercing ring filled his ears. He tried to move, but his left arm was pinned between the seat and the door. The pain was unbearable, but even greater than the pain was fear, a primal fear, that he wouldn't survive the night. Minutes passed slowly, as if time itself had stalled between thunderclaps and flashes of lightning. Outside, the rain kept pounding relentlessly. No cars passed that forgotten road. No help, no headlights in the distance. It was as if the world had stopped to watch him fade. "This isn't how it ends," he whispered through clenched teeth, but his words vanished into the darkness. Then, a different sound. Footsteps. Someone running through the woods, splashing through mud, snapping branches. A figure emerged through the mist, slender, soaked, with a look of panic on her face. Her dark hair was plastered to her skin, and her eyes were wide, a mix of fear and compassion. "Is someone in there?" A woman's voice, urgent, breathless. Dorian tried to answer, but only a groan came out. The woman, a complete stranger, crouched beside the overturned car. Her hands trembled, but she didn't hesitate. She tried the crumpled door, pushed, slipped in the mud, pushed again. "Stay with me. I'm gonna get you out. Just hold on." She managed to pry open a narrow gap, and without a second thought, forced half her body inside the wreck, reaching for Dorian's trapped arm. He stared at her like she was a miracle. "What's your name?" he asked, barely audible. She paused for a moment, then answered, "My name is Lyra." And then, the darkness swallowed him. The smell of antiseptic was the first sign he was still alive. Dorian woke slowly, his eyes blinking against the cold white glare of the ceiling. A steady beep echoed in his ears, matching the fragile rhythm of his heart. His entire body felt like it had been hit by a train. Every muscle screamed, and his head throbbed as if it had been split in two. He tried to move, but his arm was in a cast. There were stitches on his forehead, bruises along his ribs, and a dull ache in his right leg. That's when he noticed the nurse beside the bed. "You're lucky, Mr. Belmont," she said with a soft smile. "Someone found you just in time. A few more minutes in that ravine and—" Dorian forced his voice through the dryness. "Who found me?" The nurse glanced at the clipboard and shook her head. "We don't know. When the ambulance arrived, she was already gone. The paramedics said it was a woman, young, but she didn't give her name, no contact, nothing." He closed his eyes, trying to recall. A face, a name, a voice. And then, like a quiet lightning strike, it came back to him. Lyra. The rain, the overturned car, her eyes locked on his, the strength with which she forced the door open, the calm she carried into the chaos. Lyra, who was that woman? From that moment on, Dorian refused to let the matter rest. Even while still recovering, he gave clear orders to his team. Find her, search emergency records, check traffic cams on nearby roads, ask around at clinics and hospitals. He offered a reward, hired private investigators, but nothing came back. No Lyra, no matching descriptions, no trace on any camera. It was as if she had stepped out of the fog and disappeared back into it. Frustrated, Dorian turned to one of his most trusted aides. "You really want to find this woman?" the assistant asked cautiously. "She saved my life," Dorian replied, and vanished like a ghost. The assistant studied him for a moment, then said, "Or like an angel." The words echoed in Dorian's mind for days after. Meanwhile, across town, Lyra walked quietly through the narrow streets of an industrial neighborhood. She wore simple clothes, kept her eyes down, and worked as a housekeeper in a rundown hotel, cleaning rooms, washing sheets, staying out of sight. No social media, barely used her phone, avoided attention like it might burn her. That night, she had saved Dorian. She was on her way home from visiting her mother in the hospital. She saw the wrecked car at the bottom of the ravine and didn't hesitate. It was what any decent person would do, she thought, or hoped. But his face? She recognized him. Of course she did. Everyone knew who Dorian Velmont was, and maybe that's why she ran. The last thing Lyra wanted was to become a story. But fate, as she would soon learn, doesn't always respect the wishes of those who seek only to stay invisible. Dorian Velmont wasn't the kind of man who gave up easily, especially not on something that had touched his life in such an intimate and unexplainable way. Since the accident, something in him had changed. The physical pain was healing slowly. But there was another wound, deeper, more persistent, that throbbed every single day: the absence of answers. Who was Lyra? Why had she saved him? And why had she disappeared without a trace? Behind the polished walls of Velmont Industries, executives began to notice his lack of focus. Meetings were canceled, decisions postponed, rumors in the press pointed to exhaustion, maybe a personal crisis. But no one knew the truth, that between confidential files and late-night meetings with private investigators, Dorian was searching every corner of the city for the woman who had rescued him. Discreet posters had been posted in quiet places. Looking for the woman who helped during a storm on Route 46. Generous reward. Full confidentiality. No responses. One investigator finally offered a theory. "Maybe she doesn't want to be found." Mr. Velmont Dorian stared at him, jaw tight, barely containing his frustration. "Then at least let me know why." Meanwhile, Lyra watched everything unfold from afar. In the small back room of the rundown hotel where she worked, she overheard a receptionist reading the headline out loud. "Silicon Valley mogul searches for mystery woman who saved his life," like something out of a movie. She pretended not to hear, but her heart was pounding. She knew they were talking about her. It was the first time that name, the one she'd whispered in the dark, had any real weight, and that terrified her. She pulled an old box from under the bed. Inside, a photograph of her mother, a delicate necklace with a small blue stone she'd worn since childhood, and a notebook with worn edges. She opened it and wrote, "I can't let him find me. He doesn't know who I am. He doesn't know what I carry. I saved his life. But he can't be part of mine." She closed the notebook, took a deep breath, and the next day quit her job. The hotel manager tried to convince her to stay, said she was reliable, hardworking, that she had a place there. Lyra smiled and thanked him. She only said she needed a fresh start. That same day, she changed the SIM card in her phone, packed her savings and the blue stone necklace, and left for a nearby town, with nothing but a backpack and her silence. Dorian, meanwhile, felt her slipping further away. One night, staring at footage from a roadside security camera near the crash site, he froze the frame at a barely visible moment, a slender figure running through the woods, soaked in rain. "That's her," he whispered, zooming in. He couldn't see the face, but the way she moved, the way she stepped into chaos without hesitation, left no doubt. He lowered his forehead into his hands. "Why did you vanish, Lyra?" The answer would come, but not the way he expected. Dorian wasn't a man easily consumed by emotion. At least, he didn't used to be. Before the accident, his life was ruled by goals, numbers, and contracts. He lived by calendars and deadlines. But ever since waking up in that hospital with Lyra's name on his lips, nothing had made sense without an answer. Each day without news of her made his obsession grow stronger. He declined invitations to events, ignored interview requests, and spent sleepless nights analyzing every clue, every corner of the city where she might be hiding. He hired a team that specialized in missing persons. He even commissioned a sketch artist to recreate her face from the hazy memory burned into his mind. Still, nothing. The frustration began to spill over. During a company meeting, he cut off an executive mid-presentation and snapped, "You know what matters most to me right now? Figuring out why the one person who pulled me from the edge of death disappeared without a trace." The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. Behind the scenes, rumors started to swirl. Some said Dorian had fallen for a mysterious woman. Others whispered he was suffering from post-traumatic stress. But none of them knew the truth. He just wanted to understand. He needed to see her face again. He needed to say thank you, or something more, though he wouldn't even admit that to himself. Then, one night, while reviewing roadside footage near the crash site for the 100th time, Dorian noticed something new: a necklace. The woman, her image blurry beneath the rain, wore a necklace with a blue stone that glinted under a flash of lightning. Simple, but unique. That's when it hit him. He didn't need to keep searching for a woman. He needed to start searching for a necklace. While Dorian refined his search with a quiet, growing obsession, Lyra was doing everything she could to disappear completely. She now lived in Greyhill, a smaller town nestled between hills, far from the glow of screens and the noise of city life. She found work as a caregiver at a modest elder care clinic, where her calm and gentle manner quickly won over the residents. She didn't use social media. She avoided giving her full name. And when people asked where she was from, she would simply say, "From a place I'd rather forget." Even in silence, she carried the weight of her secret. Sometimes, late at night, when everyone else was asleep, Lyra would sit quietly in the clinic's garden, looking up at the stars. She would think about the man she had saved, the blood on his forehead, the way he had whispered her name before slipping into unconsciousness. She knew who he was. Of course she did. Dorian Velmont wasn't a name you could forget. But if he ever found out who she really was, everything would fall apart. Because Lyra wasn't just a quiet, kind woman from nowhere. She was the daughter of someone Dorian might never be able to forgive. Back in San Delano, Dorian continued his quiet crusade. He created a charity fund under a discreet alias, the LS Foundation, offering donations to clinics, shelters, and care homes across the state. The idea was simple: distribute help where someone like Lyra might be, and wait, from a distance. It worked. One of the monthly reports caught his eye: a new caregiver in Greyhill, no official background, no formal resume, but glowing praise from staff and patients. Gentle, brave, always wearing the same necklace. Then came the line that made Dorian's breath catch in his throat. Dark hair, light skin, wears a blue stone necklace every day, never takes it off, not even to sleep. It was her. But now that he knew where she was, another question surfaced. Should he go to her? Because as much as their worlds had collided by accident, belonging to each other was something else entirely. Dorian didn't hesitate. The next morning, he boarded his private jet bound for Greyhill. No security, no assistance. Just a small envelope tucked into the pocket of his jacket and the name of the clinic she worked at scribbled on a card. During the flight, he stared out the window, as if trying to imagine how the reunion he had longed for and feared might unfold. Greyhill was quiet. Wide, silent streets where time seemed to move slower. When he stepped out of the rental car in front of the clinic, he took a deep breath. He was here, close to her, again. At that moment, Lyra was inside, changing the bed sheets for a woman named Agnes, a former ballerina who loved telling stories of her youth. Lyra smiled softly as she listened, even though she'd heard the tale 100 times. It was a simple life, but peaceful, the kind of peace she'd never known before. She heard the front door open, didn't think much of it. Visitors came all the time, but when she turned the corner and saw the man standing there, still, serious, eyes locked on her, her knees almost gave out. Dorian, He was there, real, alive, and just as present as he'd been the night of the accident. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Time froze between two worlds that were never meant to touch again. "Lyra," he said, voice deep, quiet, as if still unsure she was real. Her stomach tightened. "You shouldn't be here," she replied firmly, though her heart was pounding. "I've been looking for you for weeks. I had to understand why you disappeared." She looked away, fingers gripping the blue stone at her neck. "Because I don't belong in your world, Dorian. I was just someone who happened to be in the right place. Or the wrong one. Depends how you see it." He took a step forward. "You saved my life, and then vanished. That's not normal. That changed me." Her eyes burned with emotion, but she stood her ground. "And what if that's all it was? No mystery, no story. I just helped and kept going. Then why do you still wear the necklace from that night?" Her silence said everything. Dorian pulled the envelope from his pocket and held it out. Lyra didn't take it right away. "What is it?" "It's not money, it's a note." "What does it say?" He hesitated, then met her gaze. "It says that if you ever let me in, even for a little while, I promise not to hold on too tight. I just want to say thank you." She finally reached out and took the envelope. And then, as if the moment had grown too heavy to carry, she said quietly, "You need to go, Dorian." He nodded slowly. But before turning away, he gave her one last look. One that said more than any letter ever could. And in that instant, Lyra knew their worlds would never be the same again. Lyra stood still for several minutes after he left. Her hand still held the envelope, but she didn't open it. Not yet. Her chest ached, as if his visit had torn open a wound she had spent months trying to forget, trying to bury. That night, lying in bed, sleep refused to come. She turned the blue stone of her necklace between her fingers and let her mind go to the places she'd tried so hard to avoid. Her father, the past, the story she had never told anyone, the real reason why she could never get close to Dorian. Not truly. And yet, there was something about him that broke down her walls. It wasn't the money. It wasn't the power. It wasn't the name that filled headlines. It was the way he looked at her, like she mattered, like she was seen, like somehow she still lived inside him, even after disappearing without a word. Across town, Dorian sat in a modest hotel room far from the luxury he was used to. He ran his fingers through his hair, restless, staring at the ceiling like it might give him an answer. He knew Lyra was hiding something, not just a secret, but something heavy. Something that kept her from letting him in. She was strong, grounded. But in her eyes, there was a quiet sorrow, like she carried the weight of a past that still refused to let go. The next morning, he left. He drove away from Greyhill without trying to see her again, without calling, without pushing. He respected her silence, but deep down, he knew. That story wasn't over. A few days later, Lyra finally opened the envelope. Inside, there was only a single folded sheet of paper. No signatures, no embellishment. Just one sentence, written in a steady, unpolished hand. "I don't want to buy your gratitude. I just want to be worthy of your forgiveness, even if I don't know what for. D." She closed her eyes as the tears came. Soft, unstoppable. It wasn't fair. It wasn't simple, but it was real. And as much as she had tried to keep running, maybe it was time to stop. In the days that followed, Lyra tried to go about her routine as if nothing had changed. She helped the clinic's residents, served breakfast, organized medication, smiled at visitors. But something inside her had shifted. It felt like opening that envelope had also opened a door, one she had sworn to keep closed forever. She couldn't sleep the same way anymore. Dorian slipped into her thoughts at the most unexpected times, in the steam rising from a cup of tea, in the distant hum of a song, in the sound of rain against the windows. And it unsettled her. It wasn't just about him. It was about the truth she carried and had never had the courage to tell. That afternoon, she sat outside with Agnes, the elderly ballerina, beneath the soft warmth of the fading sun. "You're different, sweetheart," Agnes said, her voice gentle and wise, the way only time can make it. "Your eyes are somewhere else." Lyra hesitated. "I saw someone from my past. He showed up, out of nowhere. Is that a good thing or a bad one? I don't know." Agnes reached for her hand, squeezing it with quiet understanding. "Sometimes the past doesn't return to haunt us, darling. It comes back to set us free." That night, moved by something, but he didn't answer, and in that moment, Lyra understood. She may have just lost the one fragile thread that still tied them together. Hours had passed since the call, and Dorian hadn't called back. Lyra remained seated at the edge of her bed, holding the landline phone in her lap, as if it might ring at any moment. But it didn't. Not that night. Not the next morning. And every minute of silence felt like a sentence being carried out. She knew she had risked everything by revealing who she was, but hiding had become its own kind of lie, and she already carried too many of those. The truth, no matter how painful, was her only chance to move forward, with or without him. Dorian, meanwhile, stood in his penthouse in San Delano, staring out over the city skyline. In his hand, a crumpled piece of paper with the name Vincent Santiel creased from how tightly he'd been gripping it. It wasn't just a name, it was a wound. Vincent had once tried to destroy his company with lies, manipulation, and a forced merger that nearly ended everything. Dorian had almost lost it all, and in the aftermath, he swore he'd never trust anyone again. Now, the daughter of that man had saved his life, and he felt something for her. But what was he supposed to do with that? He reread the note she had left for him days earlier. He thought about the night of the crash, the look in her eyes at the clinic, afraid but full of quiet strength. And he thought about how many chances she'd had to use her last name, and never did. She didn't want power. She didn't want forgiveness. She just wanted him to know. By late afternoon, he grabbed his car keys and drove without thinking. He had to see her face again, before his anger made decisions his heart would regret. He reached Gray Hill after dark. The clinic was already closed to visitors, but he waited, sitting in his car, engine off, watching as the lights inside flicked off one by one. Then she stepped out, bag slung over her shoulder, walking slowly, like someone who'd had a long day. When she saw him standing by the car, she stopped. She didn't look surprised. Just, "Ready. You came." "I did. I figured you wouldn't. I figured the same." A short silence fell between them, tense and unspoken. Dorian took a few steps closer, his expression hard, but his eyes more open than ever. "You're Vincent Santiel's daughter." "I am. And still, you saved me. Not because of who you were, but because of who you were then. A man, hurt, alone, needing help. I didn't see a billionaire. I saw someone fighting to stay alive." Dorian took a deep breath, stepped closer. "And now?" Lyra hesitated, then answered, voice steady but soft. "Now, it's up to you to decide whether my past matters more than my choice." Dorian looked at her for a long moment. Then, without a word, he extended his hand. And she, without hesitation, took it. With her hand in his, Dorian felt a strange kind of peace, something he'd never found in business victories or signed contracts. It was quiet, rare, human. Lyra didn't have the cold polish of corporate boardrooms, nor the rehearsed sparkle of the parties he used to attend. She was real. And maybe that's exactly why, for a moment, the rest of the world seemed to disappear. They walked side by side through the nearly empty streets of Gray Hill, taking their time. There were no urgent words left to say, only presence. Two lives walking side by side after so many twists and distances. They sat on a park bench beneath an old lamppost, its soft amber light glowing over their faces. "You know what's funny?" he said. "You disappeared when I needed someone the most, and yet, I couldn't bring myself to be angry." Lyra turned to face him. "Because deep down, you knew I wasn't running from you," she said. "I was running from who I used to be, from the name I carry." Dorian nodded slowly. "You're so much more than a name." She smiled, a small, quiet smile, but full of relief. "So are you." The next morning, he left again. But this time it was with a shared promise. No more vanishing, no more letters, no more silence. Lyra didn't go with him, not yet. She wanted to close old chapters, finish what she'd started, and make peace with her own heart before diving into someone else's. Dorian understood, and for the first time, he realized that real strength wasn't about control. It was about waiting with your heart open. Months passed. Lyra finished her work at the clinic. She visited her mother's grave, donated half her savings to a local shelter, and then, on a clear morning, she boarded a train to San Delano. When she stepped off at the station, he was there, Dorian, holding a cup of coffee, wearing that quiet smile she remembered. No words were spoken right away. He simply handed her the coffee, and she took it, the way one accepts a new beginning. Years later, newspapers told the story of a mysterious woman who had saved a billionaire's life, then vanished without a trace. But only a few people ever knew what truly happened. Sometimes, those closest to Dorian would hear him speak of a woman named Lyra, his voice softer, his eyes brighter. And the two of them, far from the spotlight, didn't live a fairy tale. They lived a real life, one with highs and lows, secrets and healing, a love not built on promises, but on brave choices. A love that, for a moment, almost didn't happen. But that, by grace or by fate, found its way and never disappeared again.